Greetings, everyone. My name is Peter Young, and I'm one of the members of the Yale Career Panel Planning Committee. And we want to welcome you today to what I think is a very exciting panel on digital health, navigating careers in health, in digital health. And we're very fortunate to have founder CEOs from three companies focused on digital health. I'm only going to talk for a minute and turn it over to Doug Streat. This series started in 2012 because a number of us who are Yale alumni perceived that there wasn't enough information for Yale students and alumni to help them understand what really is true about being a lawyer, investment banker, and so forth. And I'll date myself and say, too many people decide to go to law school because they watched the show LA Law, which I'm sure no one who's watching knows that TV show. But the whole idea is to really give them a chance to hear from people who are out in the world and experienced, and many of whom are Yale graduates, what it's really like to be in a particular profession, but also what does the future look like. So with that, I want to turn this over to Doug Streat, who will introduce himself. And I will disappear. And again, just two things. One is this is a 1 hour session, and Doug will, as moderator, will decide how much time to leave at the end for Q&A. And if you want to ask a question, just type it in the Q&A chat box that you'll see at the bottom. And both Doug and the panelists will be able to see the questions. Doug?
Excellent. Thanks, Peter. And good to see everyone. Thanks for joining us. I know we still have a few folks trickling in. We had a couple hundred registrants, so I'm sure folks will continue to join as we get started here. My name's Doug Streat. I am the Senior Vice President for Strategic Initiatives at Aledade. Aledade is a company that serves primary care practices and physicians all over the country doing value-based care. If you're not in healthcare or you haven't been super deep, it's okay. There's lots of buzzwords. We'll try to demystify them as much as we can today, but Aledade, by the numbers, was founded in 2014, has grown to over $1 billion in revenue, serving 30,000 plus clinicians all over the country and several thousand practices ranging from primary care practices to health systems. We're really proud of the work we do, very mission-driven, public benefit corporation. Lots more to say there, but this panel is not about Aledade. It's about careers in digital health. And when I was thinking about what we could talk about with this group, I was really pleased that we were able to recruit three talented and very busy founders and CEOs who were willing to donate their time generously to give back to the community, to pay it forward to Yaleys or others in the broader Yale Friends community. And I'm looking forward to hearing from each of them about their experience founding companies, leading companies, building companies, all in this broad space that we call digital health, which is another one of those buzzwords that maybe we can unpack as we go through our conversation today. If you're on this conversation here, I hope that maybe you're interested in being an entrepreneur or a founder yourself. Maybe you're interested in healthcare and how technology is changing the healthcare landscape. Maybe you don't know what you want to do and you're just interested in understanding what this particular sector of the career economy looks like. In any of those cases, I hope you'll get something out of our time today. And so with that, I'd love to take a few minutes to introduce our panelists today. We have Derek Lowe, the CEO of Medallion, Nick Bartz, the CEO of Kairon Health, and Nell, Meosky, the CEO of Folia Health, all here to join us to talk about their journeys. And maybe I'll turn it to each of you in turn to tell us a bit about your story. Tell us maybe about your time founding your company, what led you to found your company. You each have very different backgrounds, so I think it'd be great to hear a bit about your background and sort of what problem are you solving with the company that you've built. Maybe we'll start with Derek.
Cool. Great. Yeah. Thanks, Doug. Well, one, thanks for having me. It was a really exciting opportunity to talk to some Yaleys. So my name is Derek, founder and CEO of Medallion. I started this company about 6 years ago, and really the core purpose and mission of the company was to automate as much administrative complexity as possible for provider groups to be able to enable them to onboard providers faster to ultimately see patients quicker. So yeah, that's a bit about what we do. And yeah, happy to kick it over to Nick.
Thank you very much for having me, Doug. Always great to see you again. Doug and I worked together at Aledade for quite a few years. It was a pleasure to work at Aledade for 10 years and get to tangle with some of the most complex problems in healthcare and epidemiology and operations. And it led me to a point where I really felt like people were underinvesting in the tech of healthcare operations, and the work that goes into all the boring stuff, all the blocking and tackling and operational change management of getting to improvements. I took a bit of a leap of faith that we could build something that really took a big swing at that. And a lot of the time at Aledade really helped kind of season a POV and a philosophy there. And luckily we had a couple initial development partners that gave us the enthusiasm and the incentive to get it off the ground. And we've been able to build it out from there ever since.
Great. Nell, you want to take us home?
Yeah, thank you guys. This is a nice panel to be on, and I'm new to everybody, so nice to meet you all. My name is Nell Meosky. I'm the founder and CEO of Folia. We've been around for 9 years, actually going close to 10 this November, which is pretty remarkable. And we started out from an attempt at a PhD thesis topic in chronic disease epidemiology. So I had focused on public health in undergrad. I'd actually been an MIT undergrad. I was a chemistry major, and then I got really interested in public health. I took a systems thinking class that introduced me to that concept. Then I ended up transferring to Yale to focus on public health. It was during like the ACA was happening, which some of you may not know that that's what Obamacare, the original name of Obamacare. And so it was a time when outcomes research got funded for the first time. So there's something called PCORI that got started, one of the first PCORI centers, I think maybe the first PCORI center, which is the Centers for Outcomes Research and Innovation. That got started at Yale while I was there. So it was a place where there was a lot of outcomes research happening. And so I got kind of bitten by that bug. So first I got bitten by the public health bug, and then within public health got really interested in outcomes research. Ended up going to consulting for a couple of years and working with some kind of interesting clients across like IP and on the chemistry side, and also provider systems. And then I got interested in going back to grad school, and at that point decided that I really wanted to get into outcomes research, and that's what led me to Folia, which is the way that we in the real world actually collect better outcomes on how people are experiencing their complex chronic conditions. And so we've been doing that now, kind of a thesis project that got, I think one of my angel investors called it for a while Nell's overfunded lab, but it's now a real company. So that's been kind of my slightly different journey toward starting something.
Love it. Thanks for the background. So we already have landed it in the realm of jargon, and so I want to pull us back out briefly. If you can all give me just what does your company do in one sentence in a way that is accessible to someone who maybe doesn't know the industry super well? Do you want to start now?
Sure. Yeah, and I'm the one who started the jargon too, so I don't know, you started with me, but
it wasn't you.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry.
Great.
It started at the beginning.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're someone who's living with a disease where it's having an effect on your daily life and it's chronic, so you're likely to live with it for a lot of your life, this is something like lupus, for example. You're experiencing a lot of symptoms, you're experiencing flares, you're taking different treatments, you're trying them, seeing the side effects, downgrading the dose or increasing the dose, changing treatments. And all this information I'm describing does not exist within any of the informatics systems within healthcare. So the data that Folia collects is everything that you're noticing that's currently missing from EHR records, which are the clinical records that are created at your doctor's office, claims data, which, believe it or not, is actually used to make decisions, but it's literally just like the billing information that happens when you go to an appointment. So this is a new set of information that comes from the patient's perspective. We call it home reported outcomes, but it's kind of the basic principle. And the reason that our customers work with us is that they want to understand what people are actually feeling and if they're actually feeling better when they're on their therapies.
And so your customers are mostly patients. Is that fair to say?
We have a 2-stakeholder business, which is not the easiest thing. Technically it's 3, but like the clinicians are kind of tertiary for us. So it's patients, so people who and caregivers, so sometimes a family member who's taking care of someone, and then it's biotech and pharma and some academics, who are academics who are therapy oriented. So we do work with basically the people who create the therapies to understand how well their therapies are working. And then we work with individual users to collect that data and use it for themselves. So it's kind of the symbiotic system where I actually use Folia for my son who has asthma and eczema. And then that information is actually part of an eczema study that we're running with a partner.
Great. Nick, how about you? What's the one sentence on Kairon and what you do and who your customer is?
Yeah. So, so in the healthcare system, you got physicians doing a whole bunch of work. And then you got a whole bunch of other people doing all manner of other jobs, ranging from clinical to administrative. Physicians and their staff and their billers have EHRs to help them get their work done effectively. And EHRs are either good or bad at that, depending on how you're feeling. But there's no tech system for everyone else doing a whole bunch of work in the system. And for a long time, everyone was kind of building it themselves, some of it in Excel and Google Sheets, as Doug and I know very well. And so we set out to build essentially the EHR for all the other people in the healthcare system, trying to improve care, either at a high level, at a hospital or a health system or at a practice, but all the way down to an individual patient's care transitions, proactive care management, everyone who wasn't being served by an EHR. And our customers are pretty broad range, but right now they tend to be people who manage value-based care contracts and risk in the healthcare system in general.
Great. And Derek.
Yeah, cool. So our business, we primarily serve provider organizations. So and mostly with a focus on digital health companies and ambulatory, so like urgent care, physical therapy, mental health. Actually, Aledade is one of our customers. And yeah, essentially we help with a lot of the like back office administrative onboarding tasks that healthcare companies have to do to hire providers and actually get them billing and like seeing patients. So one of the main workflows that we help solve is if you've gone to the doctor and they take your insurance, the doctor had to essentially actually go through a set of back office, form filling and a bunch of like paperwork steps to get registered with that insurance plan. So we essentially help with that, so that when patients go to see their provider, they can actually be treated. So yeah, that's where we focus.
Great. Hopefully folks are starting to get a sense of how broad and complex this digital health umbrella can be, ranging from serving patients to serving providers to serving larger organizations to working with payers, insurance companies. There's a whole bunch of different business models that exist here, lots of options. I'd love to talk about entrepreneurship and each of your journeys as you've thought about what problem to solve and where to play. For whoever feels ready to answer first, what is sort of one of the best parts and one of the worst parts of your entrepreneurship journey? What's been great about it and what's been hard about it?
There was this quote that I ran into on LinkedIn, and I know this is not usually the place to find like really interesting information, and I'm pretty sure this was not written by Claude. I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like it's not. But it just caught my eye because it feels very similar to my experience. I'm going to read it. It says, "My friend spent 10 years building a healthcare company, nearly went to zero twice. I asked him why he didn't quit. His answer, he believes his company is a must-have, not a nice-to-have. Patients need what he built." And I think that's kind of the experience. I mean, so I have a weird situation recently where I hired one of my friends from Yale like 3 months ago. And that was not my intention. Like I've kind of been a little bit wary of that. But he was exactly the right fit for the role. He wanted it. And then I had a conversation with him where I was like, and luckily he wasn't like one of my best friends. He was a year ahead of me, but we were both in TD. I knew him relatively well. And I was like, listen, you don't want to be in healthcare. Like, let me try to convince you, because he hadn't been in healthcare before. And I was like, let me try to convince you that you don't want to be in healthcare. Like, it's like this terrible, like you get sucked in, you can never leave. Like it takes you triple the amount of time to make any impact. Like your career will like feel like it's a giant headache and you don't know like how to actually get it to get over the mountain and like right, achieve the thing you're trying to achieve. And he still joined us, which was honestly amazing, because I was like trying really hard to convince him not to. And I think that there's like, it's this extremely double-edged sword where on the one hand, you do have the possibility for a lot of impact. And sometimes I think I almost get dulled to it, but like there are a lot of people being helped by what we do all the time. And when I'm having a really bad day, I can look in at these testimonials that are recent, right, from like people this week who are like actually having their, healthcare journeys impacted and their lives changed sometimes because of the work that we've done. And then on the flip side, it can be excruciating, and it can take, we're about to launch a program that's taken probably, I don't know, like 20 months to get off the ground because of the number of internal committees. And it's not good. It's not like for good reasons. It's because some of these large pharma companies literally don't want to ever create any new information because they see risk in new information. And so, we're an informatics company. We work with pharma and biotech. And so we're always fighting them to say like, you have to know this or someone else will know it. And that's pretty soul sucking to be like the people who are developing these drugs. On the one hand, they want to help you. And on the other hand, they really don't want new information because of the incentive structures that exist. So I would say I truly both love and hate it all the time is my experience.
Nice. Derek or Nick, any reflections on entrepreneurship?
I think the hardest part, in all honesty, is that the desire to continue to build your company does not stop at 10:30 p.m. at night. And you, especially as you start to get into, later in life, you just have to start making some very complex decisions about how much time you want to spend with your children. And that's pretty brutal. And not to mention how much time you want to spend with your wife. So the double-edged sword part of that is that I want to work on the company. We're in a world where we're just crossing the frontier where I think healthcare data is starting to become a little bit less painful and opaque, and starting to open up a whole bunch of other really awesome opportunities for both analysis and execution. And so, with the platform that we have, every bit of time that I spend trying to think up, new tools, new analyses, potentially has an impact on a patient that can go and get worked by their primary care physician tomorrow. So the work is fun. You're using tech, you're using data, you're implementing it, you're figuring out how to get it in practice, and then if you're good at your job, it goes into practice. So I think that's the best part, is seeing kind of the light at the end of the tunnel at the work, really, really closely, of being able to impact patients. But never underestimate that when you're the boss, no one's going to tell you it's okay to go home early.
Nice. Derek, this is to brag for you. This is your second run at entrepreneurship, at least your second run at entrepreneurship. So you've been through this. What lessons do you have?
Yeah, well, so right at Yale, started a different company, not in healthcare, in actually consumer education, and it was a pretty challenging journey for a number of reasons. It's pretty hard to build a business in ed tech, and yeah, that company had kind of like a falling out with my co-founder at the time, which was pretty difficult. It ended up getting acquired about 7-8 years ago now. So we ended up finding like a decent exit for everyone, which was good. I'd say like with Medallion, one of the things that's been most rewarding is probably just like getting to work with people that are really great and talented. Um, I think that's probably been the most rewarding thing, and I think it's been cool to see that the talent density of the company rising over time. I think it's, at least in my experience, it's pretty hard to recruit really good people when you've got no track record and you don't have, you know, a
Mm,
company yet. I think it becomes a lot easier as you start to grow and scale. So I think that's been pretty fun. And then probably the hardest thing for us has been um, at times we are a little bit at odds with some of the inherent like incentives within healthcare. For example, payers are not always super motivated to onboard providers to the network faster. And so it can be kind of challenging sometimes to navigate, yeah, that like kind of incentive problem when you want to deliver a really great experience to your customers, and you have to depend on, you know, kind of like this third party, you know, different entity that's not you, to deliver that great service. So that's probably been one of our challenges.
yeah. So hearing lots of recurring themes here, ranging from, the best parts are being motivated by the opportunity and the mission and seeing scale and growth and seeing how your success compounds on itself over time. And some of the hardest parts are, there's no one to turn to. It can be lonely. You gotta build quietly for a long time. And challenges with the incentives in healthcare and all the entrenched stakeholders, which I have definitely experienced firsthand. That is a major challenge in the healthcare industry specifically. I'm surprised, Derek, that you didn't mention the awesome swag. I'm admiring this jacket, this medallion jacket that you're wearing. Pretty sweet.
Yeah, we can send you one, Doug.
um, we're getting, by the way, great questions in the Q&A. If you haven't dropped in yet, feel free to. I'll keeping an eye on it, and I'll probably weave some in throughout, and we'll also leave some time at the end. Uh, you know, I think each of you has raised some amount of venture capital to support your businesses. I know at least a few of you have. Talk to me about fundraising. Talk to the group about fundraising. If someone's jumping out and considering starting a company, any lessons on how to make fundraising less painful? Would you take venture capital again if you were starting over? How should people think about that?
I think it's extremely complicated. I think the first thing I would say, so we've raised, I don't know, I don't actually know the number. I don't like using it as a meter stick. I think a lot of people use it as a meter stick for success, and it's really not, right? It's about like, what have you actually accomplished with your company? But something in the range of like, I don't know, like maybe 19 or 20 million is what we've raised. And over the course of that, I think what's become very clear to me is, first of all, when people tell you that when you're raising a round of funding and people say like, make sure that you know a lot about the people you raise from and whatever, it's like a marriage, it's gonna be 10, 15 years, whatever, which is, pretty short marriage, but I guess not. I guess that's actually like longer than average. Anyway, that's so true. It's so true, right? And that's something that like you kind of know, but my original angel investors invested in 2017. I went to a very obligatory, very boring old person party instead of hanging out with my kids and my husband like 3 weeks ago for our initial angel investor, right? So it's like, it's 2026, right? Because this guy, like, he's a really important person to me now. And it's not like he necessarily has a huge impact on our, company anymore, but like these are extremely long-term, deep relationships that you build. So that's the first thing, which is before you raise any money from anyone, even angels, like it's definitely a long-term relationship, and make sure that you like think about that and that you know who you're taking money from, and don't take the best terms if you like really like somebody else. The
I
other
just
thing
want to underline that point
yeah,
now before we get to your other
don't
thing,
do
which
it.
is like in healthcare especially, I think these are long-term relationships, because
Yeah,
whereas in some industries, like technology industries, you can go from zero to platform relatively quickly. You can have an overnight success in some cases. In healthcare, like transforming healthcare just takes time, and most
yeah,
healthcare investors are really long. They're willing to invest. Their funds are longer. They're willing to take a
totally.
decade to get their
Yeah.
returns.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
actually we've never taken any money from any healthcare investors, but I'll talk about that. We actually have exclusively for VCs, tech VCs only, some healthcare angels. because of the incentive structures, because we're not payer oriented or aligned. We're not payer aligned. And here's a secret for you. It took me like 5 years. Every single healthcare VC I've ever run into is primarily aligned with payer incentives because almost all of them have major LPs who are payers, right? So they actually ultimately care about that. So just FYI.
And just to break down the acronyms, LPs are limited partners. They are the people who invest in the investors, the people who give the investors all the money to invest in you.
Right.
And
So
the
if
payers, the
payers
insurance
don't want-
companies are giving a lot of that money to these investors.
Right. So if insurance companies are not aligned with the way that you see the world, you may have more trouble with VCs that are that receive funding from insurance companies. Sorry for the other piece is the last thing I'll say is you don't have to raise money. And back to that concept about don't see it as the badge of success. I think a lot of people are like, as a founder, I raised X dollars, right? And like, that's what I achieved. But the reality is the less you can, there's like a ratio, right? Of like how much you've actually raised versus how much you produced with your business. The better you can keep that ratio skewed in the direction of what you've actually produced with your business with less funding, the better you're doing. And it's not just like a business metric, it's for yourself, for your ownership, for your ability to make decisions, right? So I would say raise as little as you can and try to put yourself in a position where you're the one making the decision on when you want to bring in additional capital, as opposed to putting yourselves in the position, which I've been in before. Like we've made this, mistake before, where you absolutely have to take the next round of funding from whoever will offer it to you, because that's a much more complicated situation, and you won't. It's not why you got into this, is I guess the thing I would say.
Nick, Derek?
Yeah, look, I haven't been raising money for a very long time, so I'll take a very newbie kind of tack on this. I always think of how shocked I was when I kind of said, I'm going to start a business and I want to raise some money. How many people wanted to have a conversation? I think one of the hardest parts about thinking about going into entrepreneurship or starting something is the kind of chip on your shoulder you get about whether anyone's going to take you seriously or not. But they have to create deal flow. They have to talk to you. So if you're ever thinking like, oh, will anyone want to talk to me? Will I be laughed out of the room? I promise you, if you tell 2 people that you're starting a business, you'll get a call from a venture capitalist the next day. And then you will have to have at least 10 conversations. So don't worry about that being the blocking factor. The other big part of it, I think, the raise, for me, I think the first seed raise that we did and the raise that we just finished actually today is how much of your business gets developed in pitching to people. I think going from our first pitch, in our kind of little rinky-dink little seed raise to the final pitches that we were giving, our business model completely changed. I was having back and forth conversations with my co-founder, which, by the way, don't be afraid to start a business with your best friend and co-lead of your a cappella group, because it turns out it works really well, especially if they worked at McKinsey for many years. It's okay that you don't know what you're doing, and then you're going to keep refining what you're doing as you go through these pitches. There's lots of VCs who will want to talk to you, especially if you went to Yale, but especially if you're just taking a crack at something that's interesting. And so, having that period of time to refine the pitch in both instances of raising money, and kind of not worrying about, whether you're going to get invited to the big boys table or not, and kind of using the experience to really put your thesis through its paces, put your fundraise philosophy through its paces. The number of times when I was raising money where I was like, they were like, what do you want this money for? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know why I'm asking you for money right now. That's a really helpful conversation to be having, and you should have it as soon as possible. And these are the best people to have it with, because they will sniff out if you don't have a particularly compelling reason. So I found the process completely exhausting, but I also we couldn't be where we are today if I hadn't gone through it.
So many good little nuggets there, like your humble flex on finishing your round today. Congratulations on that. And
Well, yeah, I mean,
it,
there's a bittersweet situation, right? It's to Nell's point where you sell, 20-30% of your company, and a lot of things change with terms of who gets to kind of call the shots, and VCs have all sorts of arcane board maneuvers that they want to put into your agreements, and you really need someone who knows what they're doing on your side. Highly suggest you don't go into that without people who've been around the block a few times. But, for the most part, with the right partners, I think, the partners are looking kind of out for the relationship as much as you're looking out for the relationship. They're not going to turn around and backstab you in a year because they want you to run the business and be happy for a long time. But you got to make sure you're getting into bed with the right people.
yeah. I also see at least one member of my college a cappella group on the attendee list here. So you're telling me that maybe we have an entrepreneurial future together. It's good to know. I really appreciate your reminders that, VCs, it is their job to spend money. It is their job to give you their money. And so you don't need to feel sheepish about that. I think that's a good reminder. Derek, speaking of people who are eager to give you their money, you're one of those people. Tell us your secrets.
Well, first, I totally agree with a lot of the points that Nell and Nick just made. I think like one, so we raised for this company 130 million. My last company had raised like 700K. So I've like kind of done like been on both sides of like raising a lot of money, raising a small amount of money. I really agree with Nell's point on like, raising more money is not necessarily a good thing. And it's definitely not in and of itself a measure of success. You have to use the capital and deploy it to actually, produce value for people. And so, yeah, I definitely agree with that point. I think that raising money can be a valuable tool to accelerate, growth, right? And to build more stuff. Like one good example is not in healthcare, is this company called Rippling, started by this guy Parker Conrad, who's actually a Harvard grad. But he's really successful. He's built a big company, and one of the things that's interesting about them is they raised a ton of money very early on to go and build a really sprawling product. And that was kind of like their like strategy and competitive edge is we're gonna just like go really wide and raise a lot of capital. So like that's kind of like I feel like the classic like venture train sort of strategy is like you go and raise a bunch of money and you go and try and just be really aggressive at growing fast. And I think if you look at like most large businesses today, like they basically took that path, at least in tech. But I think, also like not raising a lot of money and building a maybe slightly slower growing business, but that still has a ton of impact, I think is also like there's one is not better than the other. There's just like different paths. So I think I really agree with that point on like making sure you know what you want and what you're after. So yeah. And then I think in terms of like uh the process of doing it, I think, to what Nick said, like talking to a bunch of people and making sure you drive like a competitive process. I think like that's pretty important, just like tactically for like how to do it. And then also, yeah, really agree with Nell's point on like the marriage aspect of this. That's definitely been true for us. I mean, we've been around 6 years. We've had actually one of our like our Series A lead. She like left the firm. And so that's an interesting case to like think about is like what actually happens when like your board member leaves the firm. Didn't expect I would have to think about that, but like that's something that like these edge cases and things that you don't think will happen, they actually like do end up happening. And so I think like trying to pre-litigate some of those things, even though they seem like they won't happen, I think is actually I've learned is like pretty useful. So yeah, I don't know. Those are just a few extra thoughts.
Can I chime in on that leaving the firm story? So the lead of our initial seed that we were hoping would potentially lead the next round left the firm, which was a healthcare VC firm, to I believe roll up rodeo, whatever the business of rodeo is in California. And it was like that was his new angle on healthcare, on finance and raising money. And he was like, "Yep, it's been fun. See you later. No one at the firm knows who you are. Have fun." So that can definitely happen.
Yeah.
Not usually like that. I think the rodeo feels like it's an unusual. One thing I wanted to push on, Derek, is I do think you can. I do think you can still grow fast and raise little. I think it's quite hard, and I don't think there are a lot of companies that have done it successfully, but the way that, so I'll tell you a little bit about our experience and what we've been trying to model, because there have been a couple companies, like Chime is a good example of the company that actually, the partner who led our seed and our seed 2 round, we did a seed, then a seed 2, then a series A. Chime is one of his seed investments. So I've gotten to, like, here is, and we've had a similar path, which is basically thinking about raising from the perspective of where you are on the adoption curve, and not just within the context of like product market fit, but also in the context of the establishment of your market. Because if you're in a case, and I think this is probably different depending on the business that you decide to start, but in our case, we're very much category creators, like very, very early to the market. The first several years, it was like we were crazy people, and then like the market, and we were working on moving the market, but the market was also moving. And then the past few years has been when we have raised the vast majority of our capital, because of the fact that not only had we achieved product market fit in a very capital efficient way because we were so early to market, we had to do that, but also because we decided to maintain a huge amount of our own basically decision-making ability and ability to go slowly in order to go fast. And where we've ended up now, and this was not easy and like extremely painful, right? But is that we now have a product that is like pretty bulletproof. And we really only have an issue with like marketing and sales and moving that faster into a market that's open, that we've been building, right? And so now we can raise into that. Whereas if we had raised a lot of like a war chest to go like build the product and try to like basically manhandle the market, right? Like, grab a bunch of airtime and try to like push people toward it. It could have worked, and maybe it would have worked faster, but our philosophy was, and my co-founder's his second company, was at his last company for like 15 years, is that that can then create a situation where you burn out, because like you burn out of capital and you burn out of relationships, because the VCs who invested a war chest in you early, when the market's not maturing and you can't sell enough, they're going to eventually walk away, right? Or you're not going to be able to keep raising at that speed. You're going to have to lay a bunch of people off, right? So, and I've seen that happen with a friend of mine who had an awesome idea, raised a ton of capital. He was right. And now people are building his product and being successful, but he was like 5 years too early, right? So I do think you have to be mindful of where you are in your journey and where the market is. And I would raise to it. And if you have a market that's ready for you right now, I think that Derek's point makes a lot of sense. And like the rippling concept of, what does he call it? It's like the massive MVP concept, right? Like that's really cool, and can work great. And actually, like, we would have loved to have been that company. It's just like you kind of have to know where you are with your buyers and how fast you can sell, because the VCs won't wait for that.
Totally agree with that. Yeah. I just maybe just one other thought is like, yeah, I mean, just by nature of like, if you look at like venture capital successes, like there's not like, their whole business is built off of like one or two businesses like doing extremely well, right? Like that's how all these firms, like that's their business model. But they have to deploy a lot of capital, right? To like you find those couple massive successes. And so, yeah, totally agree with everything that Nell just said. Yeah, I think that's super smart and makes a lot of sense.
Lots of shapes of these experiences.
Yeah, lots of paths, which I think is part of what we're trying to get at here, that there are a lot of paths. I'm going to make a hard pivot to AI, because you can't do a panel in 2026 without talking about the impact of AI on the workforce. And I think in particular on careers. We have a lot of folks here who are thinking about how AI is changing the workplace and changing the nature of work. And I'm curious to hear from each of you, maybe just one specific task or role at your organization that has been replaced or meaningfully changed by AI, and/or something that you have found is not replaceable by AI, at least today. Like you humans have got to do it. Either of those things. How is AI shaping either changing something at your company or is completely irreplaceable. Humans are completely irreplaceable in some place at your company. I feel like Nell's ready to go, but she started every one of the last times. Nick, go.
You're a mind reader.
Well, now she's never going to go first again. I think this is maybe slightly controversial, but I think product managers, for us at least, were kind of first on the do we need this kind of list. And I think as we grow, that may become untrue. I mean, engineer is kind of the easy answer. And I think, there's a particularly compelling argument that, AI has replaced a certain number of engineers. But product managers, I've always felt at their best are kind of mini CEOs. And building product manager skills and functions in your company is really about extending the reach of the CEO and senior leadership to be able to make smart, domain educated, and ultimately rapid fire decisions about product direction. And I think what AI does is it allows people at higher levels of the company to collate and aggregate feedback and information and progress and data at levels at the company that they would otherwise not have been able to get down to, and run analytics at levels that they would otherwise not have been able to get down to. And I think it makes it really hard to justify the investment of time and energy that goes into training someone to play that role. Now, of course, you shoot yourself in the foot because as you scale, you never trained that person, you don't have that function, and now it's all on you, baby. But I do think that there's going to be an enormous push for people who already kind of have a penchant for micromanaging, especially at the smaller stages of a startup, to say like, well, I can get access to a user activity across the app for every second of every day in the last 2 weeks. I don't need someone to do that for me. I don't need to see BI reports that someone has put into a PowerPoint slide and subtly undermine everyone on the team because the slide isn't built the way I would have built it. Like, I think a lot of that gets made easier. And I think the hard question that you have to answer is like, how do you invest in talent and ownership and accountability in a world where it's much easier to micromanage?
I have Claude running 3 different instances for me right now. This is my favorite thing. So I feel like my point of view is I love the concept of like it allows a little bit of the extension of the micromanager. So there are areas of our business there where we never have the chance to put a lot of human capital, right? Where it's like there are projects that get pushed back, or people have a roadmap, right? What I have found is that we use Claude a lot. We like did a lot of experimenting with other systems and have felt that Claude has been best for us recently. We can dramatically decrease the backlog with Claude, basically, is how I think about it. So there are like some skills that we've built that have actually totally replaced tasks for people. There are some projects that you can get to 80% on with Claude quite quickly, and so you can do something in a day that you would have had to take a week doing. And then there are certain things where you basically have then freed up the human time to mostly do it in a manual way, right? So what I would say is that we kind of think of it in terms of every person at our company is turbocharged by Claude. We're not thinking about it right now in terms of removing positions. We are thinking about it in terms of decreasing our speed of scaling our teams, which I think is a great thing. And maybe you're like noticing a trend, but we don't think that it's necessary to hire as many people to reach 100 million in revenue as we used to think, right? Which I think is great because it means we need fewer middle managers. We'll have fewer HR headaches. We'll spend less time navel gazing and thinking about our organization and spend a lot more time, externally. And so we think of it as like the surface area, basically the surface area of the organism. Isn't that whole thing? It's like surface area to volume. that's the ratio that you have to pay attention to. And like, as the volume of your organization becomes larger in relation to surface area, you can have a lot more problems associated with, managing the org. And so like for us, it's actually just thinking about what could we do? We've got like 45 people, right? Like what can we do with 45 people and how far can we go? Or how, could we make it 50, not 75, right? At the next growth stage, because of what our current humans are able to accomplish. So I would say we just don't have the only way that it's like having a negative impact on the workforce would be, I definitely would not be excited to hire someone or even to keep someone on the team who's like completely allergic to using AI tools. Because I think that that's a little bit of like a lack of intellectual curiosity at this point, or maybe like a defensiveness about your work product. But I think that like most people who are really trying to do their best work as fast as they can, as efficiently as they can, are, if it's not that they're necessarily experts, but they're open to learning and wanting to be part of this. And so that's what we found, is that as long as we're hiring people who think about it that way and are willing to collaborate with us, that's worked out really well for us so far. It's early days. And obviously Claude makes mistakes, and like you always have to have a human checking it, but yeah.
Nell, I'm going to pivot here into Derek was probably prepared to answer the previous question, but I'm going to pivot what I would love for Derek to focus on, which is, you just brought up something that would terrify me if I were a student or recent grad, which is like, I'm slowing down my hiring. And who's most affected by that? It's like the people with limited skills and experience. And I think about this a lot. I have folks in my broader network who are graduating or coming to me for advice, and they're like, what should I study? What should I do? And I'm like, I don't even know if I would go to college in 2026.
We did just hire 2 Ivy League grads that started this week. So it still happens.
Excellent. Well, and so Derek, like, I'm curious, as you think about, the role that happy for you to share a bit about how AI has changed Medallion, but can you also tell us how you would think about it if you were a student or a recent grad or someone who's career pivoting? What skills should they develop to be useful to you in roles that you might be hiring for?
Yeah, one, I was just going to say, like, I think Nell, like everything she said basically is like exactly how we're thinking about things. So like, I don't think I actually have much more to add on that. Yeah, I think on the new grad thing, yeah, I think one is like obviously definitely getting like really well versed in all of the like AI tools, right? So like, yeah, I mean AI coding, and then also just like how to use AI generally. Yeah, I think it's difficult. It's probably like trying to like develop maybe some like more specialized like expertise in a particular area like as early as you can. Um and I also think it's never been a better time to start a company. So I do think like that path is like, much there's much less friction there than I think there's ever been. But yeah, I don't know that I have a ton of like great thoughts on this. I think one, like no one really knows how this is going to play out. That's for sure. And I think two, things are changing just so fast right now. Yeah, I mean, what's clear is like things like coding, right, is like basically going away. And so I think like what's left, at least from what we see, is focusing on business outcomes, and that really comes from having a point of view and like having context into a domain, to be able to make decisions and like do novel things. So, and I think like that comes from just like spending time like doing research and like talking to people, talking to potential customers, um, people that you want to build things for, that like, or that a company is serving. Um, yeah. So I think also AI probably makes it easier than ever before to like actually get that context. So maybe that's like the good news. But
Yeah,
yeah.
makes sense. Nick or Nell, anything you would add on sort of if your early career or career transition skills to develop today and to be useful in an AI forward workplace?
I can give like a very specific example. So maybe 2 things. First of all, this happens a lot, right? With these, and I know AI feels like it's huge, and it changes a lot of things, but there are many technological revolutions that happen, especially over like the past 150 years, and people do adapt and get jobs and like find ways of supporting their families. But like they're like these are things that happen. So like I'm sure you will adapt. My experience very recently was that I interviewed someone a few months back. I'm still the head of our data science team. It's kind of like a team we haven't hired someone else for yet. And so I was interviewing a new hire who was graduating from her data science program at Tufts. And I had the first experience I've ever had of sitting across from someone who's brand new coming out of school and thinking to myself, like, this person has to convince me that I can't do her job entirely with our current Claude skills. And that was I felt weird about it. Like being a human across from another human who's like walking in really dressed up for like an in-person interview. And I'm thinking like I wanted to do right by her as a person. And I also have to do right by my company. Right. And I also was thinking, how do I honestly offer you a job? This is like a final round interview. How do I honestly offer you a job knowing that I will be able to keep you employed for longer than 12 months? Like, I don't want to think about this in terms of like an interim role for you where you're going to get kicked out in 12 months because we're like, this is a completely useful job. So it was a really interesting, 45 minutes. And what I came to, we did hire her, and I never told any of you this story. But when I was sitting across from her, what I realized is I was asking her questions about her personal attributes a lot more than I used to ask, and asking fewer questions about like her technical capabilities. Because my presumption is if you're halfway decent, which she obviously is given like her GPA at Tufts, right? You have enough technical skill to be able to utilize the tools that you can now utilize to get done most of the work that we need to get done. So now I care about you as a person, like what motivates you, how you work on a team, like what type of ambitious are you? Like, what are you trying to achieve? Because I'm trying to think about the different roles that she might move through at our company, right? Like, what could she do here? And how can she be like more of a general athlete? And most startups, when you're really small, think that way. And then you get bigger and people have to fit into certain buckets. But I am actually back in a general athlete mentality, which is that I want to believe that even if we don't have a data science team or we have one person running a bunch of code in data science, in the future, that she would still be at our company because she has these other intangible skills and traits and, background that would make her a great general athlete for us. So that's kind of the way I've thought about it.
Yeah, as the moderator, it's not my job to answer my own questions, but I will say my own career background has been as a generalist. I have been a product manager. I have been chief of staff to the CEO. I have spent time leading a large call center team. I've spent time going really deep on quality measurement. I've spent time working on account management with health systems. And there's really very little connective thread among those things, except for, problems that needed solving and that involved very sticky people problems. And I personally really believe that this is the age of the generalist. AI has made hard skills, important, but learnable quickly and supplementable with tools just around you. And soft skills, especially relational skills, I think are, in my view, some of the hardest to replace in the modern workspace. Somehow we only have 6 minutes left, so I'm going to move us to a couple lightning round questions as we wrap up here. We've been addressing some of the questions that have been coming in through the Q&A as we've gone, but I'm going to start with another Q&A question that came through, but let's answer this briefly. Folks want to know how your previous schooling helped you get to where you are today, and I will ask that question in an even more specific way, which is, what's one class you took that you think has influenced your work today?
I actually think I studied a lot of very direct stuff, which is, I think, an unusual answer. But I took a set of classes with Stephen Latham on bioethics that are very relevant to a lot of the work that I do. So that's probably my first answer.
And if you don't have a class, you can say that too. Like, if you feel like your hard education wasn't relevant, that's good to know.
Well, isn't the whole point of Yale to provide a generalist education, Doug? If I can pick a specific class, doesn't that defeat the purpose?
I think I did it wrong.
I spend a lot of time at work, and Doug might even have been in some of these meetings talking about epicycles, which are an astronomical concept, which just basically means when you try and fit a model to your bullshit instead of admitting that it's wrong. I talk about that a lot, and that came out of a philosophy class. And I'll give credit to another philosophy class. I took a class on Kant's doctrine of transcendental transcendental something. Can't have been that important. That was all about how everyone takes the same set of facts and builds a different visible universe out of them. And I find that a very compelling way of kind of thinking about problems, but also thinking about internal disputes in the workplace. So the generalist stuff to me is what helps you get up and confidently talk to people about careers and job pathways and strategy and why you deserve to be running a company. If I'd only studied one specific thing, I don't think I would be as compelling a leader or a manager or a strategist, or especially not in the metaphors that I can shoot out of my mouth. But yeah, I think a lot about what Yale taught me, and then my MBA I also think had some very, very compelling classes that were highly specific around statistics and the healthcare system in the U.S. So it's a nice combination of both.
Derek, anything to add?
I think mine would probably be CS 323. I was a CS major, and
Legendary.
yeah, class was really hard, and I think probably taught me to just think better. So
Do you ever wonder how like CS 323 has evolved in the age of AI? Like you can't do your P sets by asking Claude to do them for you.
yeah,
I wonder. I mean, I haven't talked to anyone about it, but I have wondered that recently. Like, how has the CS department changed? Maybe if anyone here is a recent Yale, you can educate us. We have 3 minutes left. I'm going to do one more lightning round, and then we'll wrap up with just how folks can contact you, reach out to you. But the one more lightning round is a book or podcast recommendation that sort of influenced the way that you think about your work. Anything you'd recommend, or
I
any
think
form of
that-
media.
I think I can do like a rapid. So if you're interested in healthcare and you haven't read Complications, you must. That's the original Atul Gawande book. There's a book called Let My People Go Surfing, which is by the founder of Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard. That's a really fabulous like management philosophy book. And then How I Built This, obviously, like if you're getting started and you haven't listened to that podcast, it's kind of a nice like you get a rapid fire of all the great well-known entrepreneurs, and they all talk to an NPR host about their early experience, which is fun. It's a cool thing to listen to.
Derek or Nick?
Go ahead.
No, you go.
I think if you want to understand the healthcare system, MedPAC produces a series of educational primers about the payment system and how it works in all of
Oh my
its
God, you're such a nerd.
incredibly boring. But literally everything that gets talked about in healthcare at some point has already been talked about in a MedPAC report. So I highly suggest reading everything that they put out.
I was just gonna say, I think the essays from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, are pretty good. I think for startups.
Those are good. Definitely subscribe to those. All right, we have 1 minute left. Obviously, there's so much that we could have gotten to that we didn't get to in this hour. If folks want to stay in touch or follow your work, what's the best way for them to do that? Whether it's LinkedIn or email or Twitter or your jobs board, your website, what's the best way for folks to follow up if they find themselves inspired?
LinkedIn.
Now.
Does that make me really weird and boring? LinkedIn.
No, all good. LinkedIn for now, Derek.
Sure, same.
You can email me, you can LinkedIn me. My email is just nick@kaironhealth.com. Yeah, I would love to hear, especially there's a lot of MDs in the chat who are interested in pivoting, and there's nothing but demand for MD experience in value-based care and digital health.
Yeah. And for my part, you can LinkedIn for me as well, or you can reach out to me via email. My email is doug@aledade.com. So similarly easy to remember. This has been a great conversation, great hour. Nell, Derek, Nick, I know you're all very busy founder CEOs. I'm not sure everyone appreciates when you are the CEO of a growing digital health company, how busy your schedules are, but I certainly do. And I am so grateful to you for paying it forward and giving some time back to this crew. Thanks for making time on your Tuesday evening. And for all of our panelists, thanks for joining. Wishing you a great evening, and we'll be in touch if we can be of service. And good luck out there.
And
Thanks, everyone.
the last comment is the 2 upcoming events. We're going to take the statistics on where Yaleys end up, and we'll have a panel analyzing where do Yaleys go. You know, what careers they pursue, and then we'll also have one on the teaching profession, which has really become a hot area for people to go, which was very, very low 10 years ago. Now it's become a fairly significant place where people go. By the way, healthcare is in fact very high on the list of where Yaleys go. So that's an endorsement for this panel. The last thing I want to say is that we have recorded about 90% of all of the panels over the last 14 years. So you can go back, and if you want to watch one on careers in music or careers in drama and film or any of those things, just go to yalecareerpanels.com, and there's a complete list of all of the previous panels and the recordings. And you know, you can watch whatever you want as you think about different careers and different choices. So with that, thank you very much, Doug, for doing a wonderful job assembling this panel. And to this panel, who's, I tell you, you guys have been really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.